Welcome to the Focal Insights Podcast Founder Hour edition, hosted by co-founder Joe Pollock. Joe has been in the e-commerce industry for over 25 years. He grew and bootstrapped his own startup to a successful exit. Founder Hour episodes go behind the scenes to learn how some of the best e-commerce brands were founded, grown, and operated straight from the founders themselves. Founder Hour is brought to you by Focal Software, a new generation ERP and operation suite for e-commerce brands and third-party marketplace sellers. Focal was built with SMB brands and marketplace sellers in mind to help them grow profitably. Now let's welcome our host, Joe Pollock.
Hello and welcome to the Focal eCommerce Insights podcast, where we chat with e-commerce entrepreneurs about business, selling online, and how to overcome challenges for success. Today we have a very exciting guest, but before we get started, and for listeners not familiar with the podcast or Focal Software is an e-commerce operations software and marketplace account management company. So if you need help growing your business profitably, be sure to stay tuned to future podcasts or feel free to reach out. Joining us today is Julie Abouzelof, who is the founder and owner of Moonrise Crystals, an online business providing ethically sourced stones and crystals. Julie is a leader for ethical sourcing practices in the gem and mineral industry and the wellness industry. She has been invited to collaborate with a United Nations ambassador and the space industry. She has patents pending for business processes that use empirical, mathematical third-party data to assess supply chain ethics. The New York Times has recommended the Moonrise Crystals website multiple times, saying Moonrise Crystals has the most transparent sourcing available online. She's a former professor and textbook writer and is now a heart-centered entrepreneur. Julie started her business in 2013 in a yurt in the Pacific Northwest and currently resides in Oahu, Hawaii. Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
All right. Well, many entrepreneurs start their business or get into business always knowing that they want to own their own business and have that in the back of their mind, always driving them. It sounds like that might not be exactly the case with you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started?
Oh, there was definitely no plan of having a business. My original plan was that I was an academic and I wanted to be a professor and stay in those ivory towers my whole life. That was the original plan. But life had a different plan for me. But when I was in academia, I was a historian and I really loved doing research. Pure research just made me excited, and to see things that maybe nobody had seen before, make a connection that other people hadn't. And then I wanted to just share it with everybody, and I want to teach everybody, hey, look what I'm learning. And I would have been completely content to just stay there. However, while I was in graduate school, I had a little random part-time job and I was working in a crystal store. And it was just this very magical, mystical, whimsical, pretty little place. And it wasn't supposed to be serious at all. It was just supposed to be this wonderful little thing I was doing for a couple of bucks. And the owner of this place, she would tell us that our job there was to hold space. We weren't supposed to be sellers. We weren't supposed to be doing like traditional customer service, cleaning. Our job was to create an atmosphere where people would feel very welcome and healed and just make people feel very good. That was our job. And the owner of this place, she used to tell me that my destiny was to work in earth medicine. And I thought she was crazy. And I said, that is not my destiny. I'm going to be a professor and I've already got my own plans. And we were both right in retrospect. So I graduated and I was a professor for a while, taught at a couple of universities. I was writing textbooks for a living. I was working at museums. I mean, I was off on that road. And then life happened and a series of events happened very rapidly. And I found myself suddenly in a small town, very far from any kind of academia. And I was totally broke with no money, and I had just had my heart broken, and I had lost most of my support system really rapidly. And after I arrived there, it became very clear to me that my life in academia was done. Like, it didn't have to be, but it was. There was a very clear, we've come to the end of a chapter. and I have no idea what's going to happen next for me. No clue. But I've just decided, okay, I guess I'm here and I'm going to be open and I'm going to see what happens. So here I am, and I have no money. I actually end up living in a yurt, and it's absolutely whimsical and magical. It's also super cheap, and I can like go and like cut firewood for heating, and that works, and it's this kind of magical little thing in the forest. Okay, this is fine. And for money, I'm like still writing textbooks. So I've got like a hotspot on my phone, and I'm sitting on the porch of this yurt writing history textbooks and math textbooks of all random things and waiting to see what's going to happen. And one day somebody tells me, well, why don't you think about starting a business? I've never thought about it before that moment. I don't want to. Like, it doesn't like zing, like, oh, that's the thing. But I'm being open. So I sit down with myself and I go, okay, if I was going to do a business, what would it be? And I ask myself two questions. What do you need? And what do you want? I say, well, as far as what do I need? I am in a small town right now and I need to be able to make money here. Also, I know I'm not going to be in this small town forever. This is someplace I'm just passing through. So I need to have something that I can take with me wherever I go, whenever that happens. Okay. Sounds like you're having an online business, is what I just heard. Like, okay, well, what do you want? I said, well, if I'm really going to be honest with myself, like truly be honest, I really like being an expert at things. That academic in me is still very strong, and I love being able to do research. I don't like to stay in a box, and I want to have a lot of room to play and to research and to write and to teach and something like that. Okay. So online, something with research, something teaching, something writing. I said, well, what else do you know besides academia? Because that's all I know. My whole job's are just teaching, 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 writing, 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 crystal shop. When I worked at that crystal shop, I learned a lot about crystals because I'm somebody who learns a lot of things. So I'd already soaked in all this knowledge about crystals, but I also had soaked in a lot of knowledge about crystal customers and what makes a good crystal shop. And I had been learning that information without trying to think, oh, I'm going to have a business one day. I was just kind of just taking it in a very general sort of way. And so I thought, well, I guess I could start an online crystal store. I guess that's a possibility. But then I was really hesitant because I knew that I knew nothing about online business at all. I was an ancient historian. Like I know nothing about like the tech world. That's just not my upbringing. I'm not, and I've never taken an accounting class, a marketing class, you know, and I knew how much I didn't know. So it wasn't like I was like, this will be easy. Like I knew that I was fighting off a lot.
But you were a researcher, right? So you can research
Yes, can.
how to do it.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm not sure if I want to do it or not. I don't even know if it's a good idea. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go and get some advice. And I reach out to my favorite person in the whole world, and he's my great grandpa. And at the time, he's 99 years old now. And I'm reaching out partly because I love him, but also he has been a lifelong salesman and businessman. So if I'm going to go, and he's been a success. So if I'm going to get advice, I want to go to somebody who's been a success at the thing.
99 years of experience as well. That's a long business life.
Oh, absolutely. Like he had been a traveling salesman back in the 30s.
Oh,
And
wow.
he was the kind of person who could like sell a drowning man a glass of water. He was that type. And even 99, he was actually still was doing sales, still went on sales calls, was doing that till he was 101 because he was just that type of person, just delightful.
Yeah.
And, in the 50s, he had owned a bunch of gambling clubs in these old little towns out west, and be the center of town where, everybody would gather every evening. So I thought, okay, if I'm gonna go into business, I'm gonna run this idea by him and see what he thinks. So I say, hey, Grandpa, I'm thinking about starting a crystal business online. What do you think? And he says to me, well, darling, I don't know very much about stones. Do people like them? I said, oh, yes, Grandpa. Oh, yes, people really like stones. And I start telling him all about the customers and the people who like them and the collectors and how excited people are in this little niche. And that if you are into crystals, you're into it and how excited. And so we talk about that for a minute. And then he says, well, I'm 99. I'm not really following too much about the internet, but I know people sell online. Is that popular? Oh, yes, Grandpa. Oh, yes. E-commerce is definitely something that's existing and it seems to be very popular and it's growing and this is the future and this is the way life is going. And people seem to appreciate the ability to buy online. He said to me, well, people can be successful selling stones and people can be successful selling online. If they can do it, then you can do it. Thank you for the vote of confidence, but I really don't know the technology and I'm a little intimidated by how much I don't know because I'm aware of that.
Was this in about, I think you said 99 or
He was 99. This is happening in 2013. Is this
2013?
conversation.
Okay.
2013. And so I said, I don't know the technology and I know how much I don't know. And I also know that I don't have money. So it's not like, anything I'm going to do is going to have to be completely bootstrapped. And I remember he just leans in and just looks me straight in the eye. And he just says, can you learn? Yeah, Grandpa, I can learn. Go get him, kid. Go get him. And so I just kind of leaped into this thing and just said, okay, I'm going to do this. Grandpa says that I can succeed, so I'm going to go succeed at this. And, just start. And I have no questions about the crystal side of it. I have no questions about customers. I don't need to do real like keyword research or market research in those ways, but building a website, figuring out how to do that. And that was the funny thing too, is that as soon as I decided a crystal business, it was like a fully formed idea in my mind almost instantly. Because it was like, oh, okay, well, I want it to be mostly my own website. And I want to be able to customize everything within an inch of its life. And I want it to be beautiful. And I want it to be the highest quality stones. And I want it to be ethically sourced. That seemed really obvious to me. And immediately I was like, oh, and I want to give back to the community. I want to be one of those businesses that's a good business with a lot of service projects and philanthropy. So I was already planning how to give money back to a community before I had made $1. So I was definitely like off into dreamland. And then it was like, okay, reel it back in, honey. Like, why don't you go make $1 first? Yeah. And so, yeah.
It sounds like when you got into business, or as I think of business or people that get into it, there's two types. There's the type that does all of the research on product market fit. And in your case, maybe you needed to research e-commerce, maybe even business, accounting, things like that. And the other type are the ones that just say, I know I want to do it and I'm just going to jump into the deep end and figure it out. But are you in between, or are you on one or either side of that?
I wouldn't say I'm even in between because I was 100% both of those. I jumped off the deep end right there and then and just opened a business and was very much just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but hey, I'll figure this out. Hopefully before I drown, it's fine. And aggressively, vigorously researching and trying to understand what I needed to do. I didn't know anything on the business side and I didn't know anything on the technology side. So there was huge learning curves. And it wasn't a learning curve. It was like a straight uphill cliff that I needed to climb.
Well, you mentioned early too that you knew you weren't going to be in that yurt forever. So you needed a business that could be somewhat mobile. I don't even think we heard the term digital nomad back then, but that's probably a little bit about what you did. So you probably thought at that point, step one is a website. Am I right?
Yes, that's exactly what I thought.
Take it from there.
So I'm thinking, okay, step one is a website. And I think a website. I'm not thinking WordPress. I'm not thinking Shopify. Like, I have no language. I have no information. It's just build a website. How hard could that be? And I have built quite a few different versions of this website over the years as I've learned more because, yeah, you just build something and see what happens and see what works. Obviously, that website's not going to do very well right at the beginning. So I also decided I better open up an eBay shop and an Etsy shop just to start giving myself a little bit of experience as an online seller. The platforms already exist. Start learning a little bit of the language. Um, I reach out to the Small Business Administration. They've got this great programs called Score Mentors where you can get linked up with some mentorship that's all free. And like, that they're the ones who talked me through, like, okay, you have to go and get a business license. And, we recommend you become an LLC and like all of the legal steps. At one point, I asked to meet with a score mentor I wanted to talk to someone about accounting because I said, I don't know how to price. I have no idea how to do this. And everybody that I'm seeing seems to be just making it up, and I didn't want to make it up. So they actually hooked me up with this old retired CFO who had worked for a construction firm. And he sat down and he said, this is how pricing works. And he writes this calculus equation for me. And he's like, hey, we put these numbers in, boom, there's your price. And he's like, and this is a real price. This isn't a made up, it feels like a price. And it's not about like, oh, how can you buy it as cheap as possible and sell it for as much as possible? It wasn't any of that. It was just calculus answer. I said, okay. And I'm still using that equation. It's something that I keep updated, but otherwise that is still the equation I'm using years later because it works,
Yeah. Yeah. And you also mentioned, when people get started, they're going to sell online. A lot of people just start with a marketplace. You mentioned Etsy, which, I mean, your products are like scream Etsy, right? Like from the start of Etsy, but you were pretty early there. So I would imagine you had some success on that platform, maybe without a lot of competition back then.
There was already some crystal competition, and if I had known anything of what I was doing, I probably could have done better. But again, I don't know what I'm doing really. And I'm more of a researcher and a teacher writer than I am a businesswoman at that part in my journey, So I'm not making necessarily like the most savvy of business choices. And it's not like, I'll hear other people talk about their business journey and they'll say, oh, and then in the first year we made, XYZ amount of money, $1 million. Like, what? No. Or like, oh, every year we're just 150% more. Oh, every year. Like, no, maybe it was like 10% more. It was like goal one, make a profit. Goal two, make that same profit and more. Like make incremental little
Grow,
steps forward. You know what I
grow
mean?
over
Just
time.
grow. Just
Yeah.
build it and grow and don't get too wrapped up in any particular number. Well, the other thing is because I didn't have a lot of money, it's not like I could also buy this giant inventory. People would say to me, well, why don't you have this and this and this? Well, I only have so much money. I only have so much space. This is what I got.
Yeah.
And we have to start here and see where it's going to see what's possible, see what's going to grow over
Yeah,
time.
your story, you started talking a little bit about your website. Usually the first website is not going to be the current website, especially when you've been in business for a long time. So you had multiple websites, I'm assuming. What are you using now? What did you settle in on for your e-commerce website?
So my very first website was on WordPress. My current website is on WordPress. So WordPress, WooCommerce,
Okay.
just better, just always better set up, everything on the back end. I use Avada theme. Love working with Avada theme. You can really do a lot of beautiful things with that. And what I love about WordPress is how much you can customize. And that's something that's delightful. At one point I thought, oh, should I move to Shopify? Because Shopify's got so many things that are built in for e-commerce. Well, by the time Shopify's even showing up or I'm aware of them, it was still a little bit more expensive than what I wanted to pay. So WordPress was also a little cheaper. So sometimes you're making choices based on those very real.
Yeah, and WordPress has been around forever and very flexible, and it
So
does have
flexible.
WooCommerce, so you have everything you need there. Shopify is a bigger platform now, but any multimedia things that you want to do, WordPress pretty much supports everything.
Yeah, so it's like you have to do a lot more building, but if you're somebody that is artistic or you're somebody that is maybe likes to have a lot of control, WordPress really is very supportive for both control and for artistry. That you can do something maybe you can push the boundaries of what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also moving backwards a little bit here to some of the things you mentioned. So you said you didn't have any money when you started it. Money's always a problem because once you started building your own website, I'm assuming you did that yourself, you immediately get into spots where you need help, right? You need help from someone, even if it's a little bit of help, and that takes money. So did you end up getting some funding for the business, or how are you able to really keep the lights on?
Well, one thing that was nice is that I am able to live a very delightful life with very little money. I've always had that skill of just living very richly at all times, regardless of what was coming in. And I'm very careful with money. So I'm debt adverse as a general rule. I like to live within my means. So, I had to be very careful whenever I was bringing somebody on that I needed, I couldn't just like elaborately just choose anybody. So I found Upwork. Now, Upwork is a company where you can connect with freelancers from all over the world, and hire them either as like permanent people, but a lot of times for like project based. And I had been a freelance writer for many years, so freelance work was no mystery to me. And so I started working with different Upworkers and say, hey, I need a back end developer to this, or I need a photo editor for that, or whatever it was that I was looking for. And I was just I wanted to always have long-term relationships with people. I'd much rather just have somebody I'm working with and build something with them. And then I was also very comfortable with working with anyone around the world. So over the years, I've worked with contractors on every continent, many, many different countries. And, sometimes it was just a brief thing, but a lot of the people I've been working with, we've had a relationship for years. And they're my go-to for, oh, I'm building my own custom database because at the time there wasn't any technology that was doing the thing that I needed it to do. So you reach out to somebody in Croatia and they build it. And now the guy that helps me constantly fidget with it, he's in Pakistan. Oh, I love him. Oh, if I could have Mufadal do like my whole life, he would be
Yeah.
amazing.
Upwork is a great resource to fill in those gaps very inexpensively, oftentimes. It, of course, has its pros and cons. You mentioned Pakistan. There's always the time zone issue as well, a lot of times
Hmm.
with Upwork. But for the most part, you've had good success there.
Oh, I've had great success. And I always had people helping me out locally. Locally could actually mean in my little town at the time. It can also mean just in the United States. It was never about, oh, I want to always go for the cheapest person. It was always, what's going to be the best fit for the reality? This is the project, this is the funding. Who can I work with that's got the right personality that it's gonna work, you know? And that
Yeah.
has always been the case. So
Okay.
yeah, no,
So
I've actually had some extraordinary luck. I mean, the very first person I hired on Upwork was this 18-year-old kid he was going to be an entrepreneurial program in college. And I hired him to do some like virtual assistant stuff. And I was like, great, you know more about entrepreneurship than me. Tell me stuff. You know,
yeah,
don't let me crash, and he was holding my hand that first year.
yeah, that's great. Get help anywhere you can get it when you're getting the ball rolling.
Well, and I think that it also helped that I was walking in with a lot of humility. Like I knew that I didn't know stuff. And so if the 18-year-old knows more than me and if he understands technology, like he and I are still friends. He works for an app building company and he builds apps for a living, so he was very techie in a way that I was not,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Okay.
So
Well, you often hear the term tech stack when we're talking about e-commerce selling. So you've got a WordPress website, you've got some marketplaces. I think you're also selling on eBay, is that right?
mhm. I
So
was selling on
marketplace.
eBay because I had bought things on eBay. So that was the one I was like familiar with as a customer. I'd
Mhm.
never heard of Etsy till I was starting my own business because that wasn't my life. I just wasn't thinking in those channels. At the time, what I was aware of was eBay, Etsy, and Amazon were the three that I knew of. And I looked at them and, here's the listing fees and here's all of the seller fees basically. And at the time, Etsy was the cheapest, eBay was the middle, and Amazon was the most expensive. So I picked two, and that's how I picked them. So at the time, it wasn't like, oh, because of ethics, I'm not going to work with Amazon. It was they were more expensive.
Mhm.
And looking at my mathematical equation for pricing, these are the two that make sense.
Yeah, it's got to work. You've got to have the margins. And that's a great example. Amazon has they're massive volume, massive platform, lots of traffic, lots of sales, but very slim margins oftentimes that
Mhm.
you have to be very careful that you're selling at a profit.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
So yeah, at the time, just kind of started things on eBay and Etsy. And for the first few years, those were the main source of income. As I'm building first version of website, second version of website, maybe it was by third that it finally started getting some traction. And then nowadays, I still am on eBay and Etsy, but it's overwhelmingly my business is done on my own website. And it is constantly being pushed and developed. And I'm just always, I call it's my constant work in progress. It's my art project. So always
Yeah,
still trying to figure things out and how do you do it better?
and
And
it's
how do you
also
and how do you
your
adapt to the technology?
and it's also your highest margins on sales as well.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah. How about
So,
any
and
other
it's the place
tools?
where I get the control, you don't have to be fighting the algorithms on Etsy or, promoted listings on eBay or whatever. I can
Yeah,
just be like, here it is. It's me.
yeah,
So,
and you don't have to worry about whatever business decisions they make when
oh
you build
yeah.
your own website. And WordPress is known for that as well, to give you that freedom. It's an open source platform,
Yes.
and they don't you can do whatever you want with it, basically.
Well, pretty much. And so it's like instead of having to deal with so many unknowns, it's like the one unknown is always going to be Google. And you can say it's search engines as a rule, but it's Google. If they're doing a core update, what does that mean? Does it hurt me? Does it help me? How do best practices change over time? So like that was the thing for me was as soon as I understood the concept of best practices, I said, well, I don't think I can afford to do anything besides best practices. So I better just, what do you need me to do? I'll do that. I don't have room or space to do anything sneaky. I better just do exactly what I'm being asked to do, which worked well for me because best practices tend to be about the best experience. So that makes sense. I'll do that. The problem with best practices, though, is that they take a lot of time and effort. And there's so much with business, there's a lot of business philosophy that's always about, or, how can you the 4-hour work week, how can you work as little as possible to make as much money as possible? That's a really common thing in business philosophy. And I don't ascribe to it. Life is effort. And if you want to do best practices, you're going to have to put in the time. You really are going to have to put in effort to be a best, to do something
Yeah,
at the best level.
historically with Google, that's always your best bet over the long term too, is to follow their rules. Unfortunately, Google sometimes will change their best practices where now
Mhm.
something is not no longer a best practice. So you have to be able to quickly adapt as well.
You do. And the funny thing about that, though, is that to some degree, it's like, oh, the best practice changed. And it's like, I mean, sort of. The details changed, the technology changed, but did the philosophy change? Not really. It's usually like continue to give accurate information, give a good customer experience. Um, the principles of what eat, expertise, authority, trustworthiness, like be trustworthy, do the things that show that you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, the details change, but the overwhelming direction, I don't think has changed that much. And even with the rise of AI, like that's the thing that I'm really focused on right now. And I'm super into studying this and how is AI changing e-commerce and how does my company need to adapt so that, you know, um, it used to be that it was all about, how do you rank? And now it's, are you shown in one of the snippets? Are you in AI?
Yeah.
So and having to adapt to that. And you can't be a Luddite. You can't be somebody who's like, oh, well, I don't want to adapt to this. This is happening. So if you can either get on board and realize this is the way the world is going, and you can either be part of that and succeed within it, or you will get left behind.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly right. I think AI is not just happening whether you like it or not. It's happening faster than anything that I've
Yes,
seen regarding the internet. It's pretty
it's
amazing.
crazy.
What other tools are you using now? Because so we're talking 2013, we went through a lot of your early on challenges, mindset, successes. How about running your business now? What tools are you using to just keep track of multiple marketplaces, e-commerce sales, your website? So what have you got going on from an operations standpoint?
A lot of
Your
it, I
tech
mean,
stack.
yeah, my tech stuff, most of it is custom built. I have very little that is out of the box because it usually just didn't fit what I wanted.
Mhm.
So, and a lot of it is just keeping track of stuff, just staying on top of things, being very organized, having very clear SOPs so that you just take care of everything that needs to happen. Like, every sale is mailed out the next business day. Emails are responded to very promptly. We always have different projects. I have a very normal, like a app called Todoist that's just like to-do list and keeps you organized, keeps all your projects so that you know what you need to be doing on any given day. So far as that goes, a lot of the tech is fairly simple, but it's streamlined and it's customized so that it works for me,
Yeah, and you
you
talk
know?
about a lot of things operationally, SOPs, customer communication. Are you using a CRM or are you leveraging WordPress for like support tickets or anything like that?
No, not really. My customer. So the funny thing though is with my customers, it's so different than most e-commerce stores. I think most e-commerce stores, it's like, where's my order? I want to return something. It's like very standard sales questions, where my questions are overwhelmingly about emotions and healing and personal journeys and asking for recommendations. And so it's very difficult to have like scripts. You really have to have a one-on-one conversation when somebody comes through and hold space. If somebody's coming and telling you a big major thing happening in their life, to be able to just really sit with them and not and be compassionate and see that real thing and not be a pushy salesperson at all. If a sell happens, great, but that's in that moment, we're just two humans having a human connection. And I know sometimes when people are telling me things, they might not have somebody else in the world that they're comfortable sharing it, but because I'm the online crystal lady, for whatever reason, they can share something that they maybe wouldn't, you kind of almost you like the confessor, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a very strange job in those ways,
Well,
and
yeah. There's
yeah.
people out there looking for help and looking for your expertise, and that's a big part of your business and your product is you are a big part of it as well.
Oh, huge part of it. And it's like some people who have businesses that they've either bought or they've sold, and I think, how can you sell the business? It's me. I'm not for sale, so I guess I'm here. I guess
Yeah,
this is what I do now.
right.
And it works, and it's very fulfilling, so
Okay, and it sounds like you were you were kind of all in on e-commerce from the beginning. Are you doing any other traditional wholesaling or business to business, or are you?
yeah, I've explored all of that for sure. Discovered a lot of stuff I don't like doing. Turns out I have no interest in selling in person. If I had a crystal shop, maybe, but I don't want to have one. I've explored wholesale. Um, I actually really like business to customer. I find a lot of satisfaction there. You
Mhm.
said in my intro about the fact that I've got a patent. I am going to be opening up something that will be more business to business with ethics and with sourcing. So I've got something that I'm working on behind the scenes, and just I'm always like, it's just a few months away. I hope that it is a few months away, but we'll
Yeah.
see. It's coming whenever it does show up. So
All
yeah,
right. Well, let's talk a little bit now about the future, since you're firmly in the e-commerce world. You've been doing it for a little while. I think currently about 20 to 25% of all transactions, retail transactions, are online. It's about a $6 trillion market growing rapidly. It got a big boost in the COVID years and has leveled off a little bit, but it's definitely growing. So what do you expect? You mentioned AI. Anything else do you see coming in the future that has your attention? And then any advice for anyone that wants to get into e-commerce?
I think that AI is hugely going to be hugely impactful, but I think what's also going to happen is we're going to see a lot of push towards big businesses versus small businesses. And so I think that if you're not able to pivot with the AI stuff, I think that it is going to have a lot of small businesses will get left behind. The world will change. I wonder if it will be everybody's now more on Amazon, eBay, Etsy type places versus will you be able to thrive as with your own business? I don't know. I know that not everybody will get left. I know that I'm going to do what I can to make sure that I move forward with it. Honestly, even the AI stuff, it's not something I've been studying very long. That is something that's only a few months ago caught my attention, and I said, "Wait, whoa, better go look at that."
Yeah.
So that's something I'm still learning. And you can't really predict the future because you don't know not only what will the technology change, but how will you change? Because sometimes like I wasn't thinking I was going to be in business at all. If you had told me that this is where I was going to be, I would have laughed because I had no idea that it was coming. So I feel like I could say, "Oh, I'm going to be this, in 10 years, this is what it's going to be." And I will laugh because, man plans, God laughs, as the saying goes. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think the biggest thing is that you have to be open-minded and you have to be prepared to pivot. You can't say, "Well, I've always done it this way, so I'm going to continue to do it this way." If you have something that is working, take the thing that works with you, but be prepared to change, as you need to. Like my brand is really known for its ethical sourcing, and that's a story of like having a pretty major pivot. Right when I was first imagining my business, I from day one I said I was going to do ethical sourcing. However, I thought that that already existed. I just assumed because I'm living in this like magical little town where there's all these organic farms and everybody's drinking fair trade coffee. So it was very much like a part of my environment. And so I just assumed that ethical sourcing would be common in the crystal business. And so for that first few years, I'm trying to do ethical sourcing and I can't really find the people who are doing it. And I'm asking questions and I'm getting really weird responses from people. And I'm already trying to just learn how to run a business in the first place in e-commerce. I'm like, man, I suck at everything. Like, why is all of this so hard? And then I had been in business already 4 years by this point, and a journalist reached out to me and she asked me if I would be willing to speak on the record about ethical sourcing in crystals. And I said, sure. And we had this wonderful interview. And then she says to me, "Do you know that you're the only person who's willing to speak on the record?" I mean, the only person willing to talk about this. And she starts telling me all these other people she had reached out to. And I say, how hard ethics is and that nobody knows how to do it and there's no guide. And she goes, "Have you thought about being the guide?" I said, "Not until this conversation, no." And even then I'm like, okay, that was a weird conversation. La la la, back to my normal life. But a few months later, I'm at a trade show to be buying, and and this is the day I almost quit my business. I'm there and I'm supposed to be buying, but I'm so mad about ethical issues. And I'm overhearing all these conversations, and there's so much, either people don't care about ethics or they're greenwashing, and either one is going to piss me off. Nobody is asking real questions that are fact-based, that are data-based. Everybody's just like, "Well, it feels good." And it's like, no, I don't like this at all. I hate all of you people. Why is everybody so corrupt? And I'm ready to quit because it just feels so icky to me at that moment.
Yeah, and I think a lot of your type of customers were just were or are just like that mindset that you said, like these are beautiful crystals from the earth. Of course, it's going to be ethical. So nobody ever thought to make sure that comes from an ethical source. But
Well, but it was
once
even
it
worse. It
comes
was
to
the
light,
suppliers. Yeah, but it's the suppliers, it's the wholesalers, it's the polishing factories, it's the miners themselves that you're like, really, guys? None of us are having this. Is this conversation not even happening here?
Yeah.
Because it was always about, well, it's pretty and this is the price. And every time I tried to ask any kind of question, you would just get this like deer in the headlights. People would shut down. They do not want to talk about that ethics side of things. And of course, at the beginning, I'm thinking I must be doing it wrong. I didn't realize that actually I was doing something unusual. I thought I just wasn't doing it correctly, you know? But while I was there, I ended up getting connected with some people that do ethics with the fine jewelry industry. So we're talking gold and diamonds. And I got connected into that community. And so they were kind enough to let me come and hang out at a conference with them, join them at a conference, even though I was this crystal lady. And they're all in these like sharp Armani suits with expensive haircuts. And there I am in jeans and, jeans and tennis shoes, hair in a ponytail. I'm the crystal lady. Hi. But I'm suddenly connected to this community and I realize like this is possible. And in fact, there is a need in the industry for somebody to come and start doing some very real ethic work and to start creating actual principles, actual standards. Because when I would look around, everybody would say, well, we trust our sources. And I would say, well, trust is good, but trust and verify. There has to be a verify. And it's not, so it's good, right? Yep. High five. Like that's not verifying.
Right.
So at that point, I did a very big pivot and I said, ethical sourcing is not just part of what I do, it is what I do. And I'm not going to just start talking about it. I have to completely transform the website. I have to completely rewrite this thing so that ethics is really in the front. And I started breaking all the rules. Like I started talking about my supply chains, and I would write way too much. And people would tell me, Julie, nobody wants to hear this. You're writing too much. You're sharing too much. You're scaring people off. Nobody wants this. But I didn't really care because that by that point you're getting pulled. Destiny has got you, and it's like, no, if I'm going to do this, we're going to do it this way. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, fine. But this is how we're going to do it. And it's really worked out. And there's so much more to go. Like to know that you're just still at the beginning of something rather than at the pinnacle. That is just, and the researcher in me, oh my goodness, I can go forever on this because it
Oh
touches
yeah.
everything. Oh my
And
goodness, the
and
amount of stuff it touches.
not just the ethics, but you said you love researching history as well. I mean, think of the rich history and diamonds and gold, and boy, you can go back thousands of years.
Oh yeah, like I mean, I just recently got some stones that are from the oldest working mine in the world. It's been being mined for the better part of 7,000 years. And
Yeah,
you're like, oh, that's just so cool. I
yeah,
want to be
that's
part of
wild.
that.
Well, some of what you talked about there too is really general business advice as well, which is to always adapt as things change. You can't just continue to do the same thing. And you said you did that. You mentioned AI is one way to make sure that you're adapting. And then also your big moment was the ethics thing, where I think it sounds like you kind of transformed yourself, your image and your company image into something more than just selling rocks.
Yeah,
It became a little bit bigger at that point.
because I mean, and I was always doing it. I mean, there was a reason that the journalist reached out to me. I had already been doing it. I just was like, if you're gonna do it, that was definitely you know, go big or go home, jump into the deep end of the pool. Don't do this halfway. If you're gonna do it, as far as you can. And people again will sometimes be like, well, how come you haven't done this? And how come you haven't done that? And it's like, I'm still bootstrapping over here. I'm still inventing this as I go. It's not like I've got, millionaire backing that's like sending me all over, you know?
Yeah, and I always think too that like there's no shortage of great ideas, but you're over here trying to execute
Execute.
on
Yes.
these already good ideas that you've committed to. But yeah, people want to constantly give you good ideas, but you can only
Oh yeah.
juggle so many at one time.
Yeah. And just to be Yeah, and it's like if somebody comes to me and there's like an idea and it's like, oh, I'm always happy to explore any idea. And if it works, then let's do it. And if it doesn't work, well, we know that didn't work. For whatever reason, we run into that limitation. And maybe it was something where it wasn't practical. Maybe there was a financial, it's not feasible. Or maybe we try something and I realize, oh, I don't like doing this. And if I'm going to be working hard, if this is my time, this is my energy that I am giving to the world, it better be something that's feeding me back. It must, and I'm not talking about money at that point. It better be something that is flowing back into me as energy so that I can keep that cycle moving. So I'm not going to do it if it's not in alignment.
Yeah, you want it to be rewarding. Money's always good, but rewarding can be in many ways. Fulfilling.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're talking a lot about these ethical gems and crystals and stones. Why don't you tell us, our listeners, a little bit about where to find more about them, your website, and maybe reach out to you if they have some of those questions for an expert.
Yes, you can always find me on my website, which is moonrisecrystals.com. And you can always send me a message, Julie at moonrisecrystals.com. I am on Facebook a little bit, not a ton, but I will show up there and have opinions and things that I would like to share. Sometimes it's about stones, sometimes it's about other ethical issues that I might want to ping in with. My website itself, you're going to see a lot of stones. One of the things that you'll see on my website is that with every stone, I give a lengthy provenance about how many hands it's passed through, what the mine was, what the polishing factory is, but also I talk about my relationship. How long have I been dealing with this supplier? Is this somebody that I have just a very brief relationship with? Is this someone I go out to dinner with twice a year? How do I know them? Have I collaborated with them on projects? Different things like that.
And that's moonrisecrystals.com.
Moonrisecrystals.com. And I always tell people, feel free to just ask me questions. I'm very happy to share what I know. And if I don't know something, I am very happy to have an excuse to go research something and to build my own knowledge and then to share that as well. And there'll be certain stones that you might think, well, why don't you have this and why don't you have that? Well, sometimes I'm not carrying something because of an ethical reason. I do have a do not buy list. So there are certain stones that even though they're very popular, even though I know I could make money on them, I'm not going to sell them because there's real evidence that tells me that this is not a good thing to do at this point. And I keep a close eye on those sorts of situations.
All right. Makes perfect sense. Okay, so with that, I think we'll wrap up today's podcast. So Julie, thank you so much for sharing your experience with our listeners. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Focal Insights Podcast. If you like this episode, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you can be alerted of new episodes. See you next time.